Hey, welcome back. It's time for another video where I hack around in some other person's code base and let you watch over my shoulder as I do it. And today I'm going to have a hack on trufflehog. So what is trufflehog? Well, it's a tool for finding and verifying credentials in code. So most of us at some point in our past have inadvertently added a password or an API token to a code base and committed that. And as soon as you do that, if you push that to a public repository like GitHub, then you've kind of leaked credentials, and some bad person could use those to do something nasty. I actually did this a very long time ago, and we could maybe use this to see if trufflehog can find my crime from many years ago. And this is in a Perl module that I wrote called Amazon SQS Simple. And let's see if we can find it. Here we go. So it's this one here. It's now owned and maintained by Mike Whitaker. Weirdly, no relation. There aren't many single T Whitakers in the world. Mike and I are not related. And for the avoidance of all doubt, the problem that I'm about to show you was written by me and not by Mike. But if I grab the URL for this repository, the problem was that very far back in the history of this repository, I added a test file, I think it was, that had an API token in it. And I then deleted the test file, but it was when I was very new to Git and I had not appreciated that simply deleting a file and committing that delete didn't completely scrub it from the history. And this actually was when I was working at Amazon. And after I left Amazon, I heard from a former colleague who said that they had a bit of a panic one day when somebody discovered this credential still sat there, still giving anyone who found it access to some small part of Amazon SQS in an account owned by Amazon themselves. So that was a bit awkward, and proof that even the best of us can make these sort of mistakes. If I treat myself as the best of us. So this is the repo that we're looking in, and the idea with trufflehog, you run it like this. You just kind of run trufflehog. You give it a mode to run in. We want it to scan a GitHub repo, so we're going to do GitHub. We give it minus repo and the link to the repository, and that should be enough for trufflehog to go and have a sniff around. And look at that, it's found it. It was committed by Simon. That'd be me, a long time ago, May 2009, and that's the key that it found, and it's also telling us that it's an unverified key. So trufflehog, if it finds something it recognizes, like it thinks this is an AWS key, it will try to access AWS with that key, and if it works, then it knows that it's still a live and verified result. Otherwise, it could be just a false positive. And if I click on that link, you'll see this is exactly the commit. Look, so this is me calling Amazon SQS Simple inside a test file, devmethods.t, and I had hard-coded an access key and a secret key. So my bad, and this was a long time ago. I'm a bit better now, but it can happen to the best of us. So that's what trufflehog helps us to do. It made that job of finding that one token in that one commit many years ago very quick and painless to find. And so I went poking around in the trufflehog issues. Oops, sorry. It's just it was there. We go. And there was one in here that caught my eye. and it was to do with Datadog. So Datadog is another tool that ends with og that is otherwise unrelated to trufflehog, and Datadog is a service for storing and displaying metrics, and it's very popular. And I use Datadog in a personal project. And if we go in here, I think it was under contributions welcomed. Yeah, there we go. The person is complaining that when you search for Datadog credentials with trufflehog, when trufflehog does that thing I mentioned a minute ago about calling the service to see if the credential is actually valid or not, it only ever calls the main Datadog API endpoint. But actually Datadog has a bunch of different API endpoints. And so if I had a credential from the EU instance, let's say, in my code, trufflehog would find it using just pattern matching. But when it tried to verify it, it would not be able to find that credential because it's not valid on this host. It's only valid it's searching this Datadog instance, but the token is only valid in this Datadog instance, and so it wouldn't find it. And so what this guy's saying here is, like, it should be possible to search all of these regions, not just one. And he's handily given a reference there to the file where the magic is all happening. So let's go and have a look. I've checked out trufflehog, and the file was this one, datadogtoken.go. And what's going on in here? Well, we can see at the top we've got a couple of regular expression patterns compiled here, and this is I poked around a bit in trufflehog. What this is basically saying is that we're looking for an instance of the word Datadog, or DD, followed, I think, on the same line by a 32 character hexadecimal in the case of an API token, or a 40 character hexadecimal in the case of an app token. Datadog has the concept of both. You need to have an API token to write metrics to Datadog. You need to have an app token to be able to do all the other things with Datadog, like read those metrics and add new users and manage your account and all that kind of thing in their API. So that's what we're looking for here, is an app token and an API token. And then down here you can see that in this method, from data, which says it will find and optionally verify Datadog token secrets in a given set of bytes, we've got a little block down here where it says, if verify, go and call Datadog's users API and pass in the values that we found that we think might be an API key and an application key, and see if we get a result. And then a bit further down, we've got, if there's no app token included, if the code only has an API token, we can try testing that as well. Like I said, some parts of the Datadog API only require an API token. So there's another URL here, but again, it's hard coded to the US East 1 Datadog host. And so before I start hacking around in this, I just went ahead and created some test data. I went to Datadog, and I already had an account in Europe, and so in my Europe account I went and created an API key called trufflehog test key and an application key called trufflehog test app. And the point is, you're going to see the values of these. Trufflehog will print them out. You'll see them during this video. By the time you see them, I will have come back in here and deleted these, so those credentials will no longer be of any use. I also logged into Datadog in US1 and did exactly the same thing. I can show you that here. So if we change over to US1 and log in there, then same deal. I've got an application key, trufflehog test app key, and I've got an API key created for this purpose. And I've stored those in a few dummy code files. So here in my on my local disk, I've got this directory, trufflehog datadog truffles, and it's got these Python files in, and they've got the credentials hard coded in them. So I've got one for the EU, which has just got an API key, one for the EU that's got both, one for the US that's just got an API key, and one for the US that's got both. And so if I run Datadog locally and point it at this directory, what I'm expecting to see is that the US keys are detected and can be verified, but the EU keys, although they will still be detected, they can't be verified. This little thing keeps popping up all over the place now. I don't want to ask Copilot. I might just turn Copilot off here to stop it from annoying us during this video. There we go. Okay. So this is my test data. And if I get my terminal up again, and so I'm going to do trufflehog. But this time, instead of GitHub, I don't want to go and scan a remote repository on GitHub. I just want to scan something on my file system. And the way you do that is like this: file system. I can't remember what you put after that. Do you just give it a path, or do you have to do? Yes, you just give it a path. Okay, so file system, and the path is that one that I just showed you a moment ago. And if I run trufflehog on that, then there are the results. And so it's found all 4 tokens. It's found the token in Datadog EU, Datadog EU API only, Datadog US, and Datadog US API only. And it's verified one of the US ones, but not the other one, which is interesting. So it's verified the one that's just an API key, but not the one that's an application and an API key. And I saw something earlier in the code that I think might be responsible for that. If we go back into the code, so again, we're back in datadogtoken.go. And if you remember, there are these two tests. First of all, there's a test that passes an API key and an application key and checks to see if they're both valid. And if not, we fall back. That sets app included to true. If app included after that brace is still false, we try just passing the API key on its own. Now the API key, we're testing that by calling this API /v1/validate. So what's that all about? Let's have a look. So if we do Datadog API validate, authentication. Okay, so here's the API that we're calling, this one. And the purpose of this is to check if an API key is valid. And if it's not, it returns a 403. So that's cool. But then this first check here, that's checking for the API key and the application key, is calling a different API. It's calling API v2 users. And I think the reason for that is that this API says here that it checks if the API key, not the app key, is valid. It's not expecting an app key to be passed to it, and it doesn't need one. So passing the app key to this API wouldn't actually validate that the app key was valid. So instead, they're calling this users API, and it's this one here, list all users, API v2 users. Yeah, API v2 users. But it says there, this endpoint requires the user access read authorization scope. And so that's something that you do when you set up your application token. And I didn't give my application token this scope, and not all application tokens will have that scope. So maybe ideally what we want is an API like the validate API, but that also validates app tokens. But I don't know if there is such a thing. I'm just sort of scanning through the API options here. Could it be service checks? This sounds unlikely, doesn't it? A valid API key is required. So I might have a look through that later and see if I can find something in here which is callable with any app token, if such a thing exists. Yeah, there's nothing else in there. Okay, but for now, what I might do, just to verify that that's why this US example is failing, let me just go and grant that token the permission that this API call is looking for. So the API call was this one, v2 users, and it requires user access read. Okay, so let's go to Datadog and log in, and let me just check. Yeah, so I'm on the US instance here, not the EU instance. I'm going to go to my application key, this one, and I'm going to edit the scopes, and it was user access read, I think, was the one that it wanted. And if I save that and then rerun my test, we should find, yeah, there we go. So now both of these tokens could be verified, but these tokens couldn't. And that's bad, because at first glance it looks like, oh, these can't be valid. These must be old revoked tokens, because otherwise they would have been verified. But that's not the case. They're not verified because trufflehog is only calling the US instance of Datadog. Okay, so let's try something really simple. Let's try just changing this to the EU instance in these two verified checks and running it again. And now we should see that these two are verified and these two from the US are unverified. Let's have a look. Ah, right, okay, but it's not, because I'm not running my code. I'm running my installed version of trufflehog. So let's go to my trufflehog folder, and I can just do it like that. Oops. File system. There we go. So that will compile and run my copy of trufflehog. Take a couple of seconds to compile. And then off we go. And okay, so it's only found the EU API key only, not the application API key. This is going to be exactly the same problem. It's going to be the fact that this application key doesn't have access to the user's API. So let's go and change that as well. So I'm going to log out of here, change to Europe, and log in. And I'm going to go to my organization settings, my application keys, and I'm going to add the user access read scope to that token. And now if I run my code again, it should work. Yeah, okay. So now it can verify that those EU tokens are in fact still live, but now it's not verifying the US tokens. Cool. So that feels like progress. And that was quite simple. And so what I originally thought might be the right way to do this would be to declare a list up at the top here. So it would look something like, var Datadog hosts equals, and we'll make it a string array, and we'd put in those. So what was it? api.datadoghq.com, api.datadoghq.eu, and so on and so forth. The various URIs were all listed in the issue here. So we could just grab all of those. And then in those two places where we call Datadog, we could loop over those Datadog hosts. And so if verify, so we could do here, we could do something like for okay, so now inside this brace, host will be set to the host that we care about. This thing, by the way, I think this is the index. So if I'd given that a value as well, then inside this loop, I would be 0 the first time the loop runs, 1 the second time it runs, and so on and so on. But I'm not interested in that, so I can just give it an underscore to tell Go that I'm not interested. Okay, so I could have done something like this. If I just move this brace down to the bottom here somewhere and save, and then here, instead of hard coding the host, I could do like that. Okay, and then this will loop across both of these. So if I run that again, I've only changed it for the case where it finds application and API key. So it's doing my looping in this case, the application and API key, and that's great. For API keys, I didn't put that same for loop in. That's the next block down here. So it's only checking the US endpoint, and so the US API only example gets verified, but the EU one doesn't. So I could add the same for loop around here, and I could add the rest of the Datadog endpoints up here, and that would work, but it would have a couple of downsides, I think. First of all, as and when Datadog add another new endpoint, that list would be out of date, and somebody would have to come in here and add another URL to Datadog hosts, and then re-release trufflehog. So that feels bad, although I don't imagine Datadog release new endpoints very often. They only have like 6 at the moment. But probably the bigger problem is that this now means that during verification, we would be making 6 calls to the API v2 users endpoint, one for each country, one for each endpoint, and then another 6 calls in this block down here. And you know, if you're on a slow internet connection, that's going to suck. I mean, that is going to add a load of latency to your trufflehog checks, and that would be worth it if most people who use Datadog use it in multiple regions. But I doubt that's the case. You have to create your account in one of the regions, and then there's no easy way that I'm aware of to sort of share your data across regions. It all lives in one region or another. So my guess is that the majority of Datadog users only care about one host. So what we really want to do is make this configurable. Right, what I really want to be able to do is at the command line be able to do sort of trufflehog file system, that thing, and then something like, you know, Datadog endpoint equals api.datadoghq.eu, or maybe list a couple of endpoints if there are more than one that I care about, you know, comma something, some other endpoint. But this is the sort of user experience I'm looking for, and then it occurs to me that just adding a command line flag might be useful, but not everyone runs trufflehog from the command line. Some people run it from GitHub Actions or from some other type of CI. People run it in pre-commit hooks. So ideally what you really want is some sort of general purpose way of adding new options. And it turns out that trufflehog kind of has this. And you can see it in the detectors for GitHub and GitLab. So if we look at the code for trufflehog, you've got sources, which are the things it can go and look in. So that's the thing you type after trufflehog on the command line. Look in the file system, or look in S3, or look in GitLab, or so on. But it also has a bunch of detectors. These are all of the services that have passwords or API keys that somebody's written a detector for. And GitHub and GitLab also appear in here. And for both of those, let's go into GitLab. You can have GitLab hosted at various different URLs. So you can see in here that that they've got this funky thing going on up here. They've got default endpoint is that, and then down in their verifying code, they're calling this verify GitLab, and verify GitLab is doing this. That looks almost exactly the same as the code I just wrote a moment ago with that hard-coded list of endpoints, but instead it's looping over the result of calling endpoints on this scanner thing, whatever that is. And this all appears to be powered by the bit of magic up at the top here. So specifically, we want to know that the scanner declared here implements this interface, endpoint customizer, which sounds very much like what we want to do, and that it has an endpoint setter that can be called to set endpoints. So let's try just adding these same bits of magic to our Datadog token file. So let me start with this one because there's something similar going on at the top of datadogtoken.go. Let me drag that over there. Oh, and let me revert my change here. Let's just get rid of that and go back to where we were. Okay. So we've got a similar thing up here. We're also declaring a scanner, and we've got this line. So we know that this scanner needs to implement the detector interface but we want it to also implement the endpoint customizer interface, I think. And I get red squiggles here saying that I can't do that because the scanner doesn't implement the missing method default endpoint. Well, that makes sense, and we want a default endpoint. And again, we can see the, let me make that a bit wider. We can see the implementation here for GitLab, and I think we want to just do exactly the same thing over here. Define default endpoint, and we're going to give it the api.datadoghq.com value. Okay, it's still complaining here. It's saying that we don't implement the method set endpoints. Well, that seems to be given to us if our struct has a detectors.endpointSetter field. So you see there, endpoint setter implements a sensible default for the set endpoints function of the endpoint customizer interface. Okay, so let's see what happens if we just stick this in our struct definition. Well, my red squiggles have gone. Everything seems happy. Over here, I don't see any other stuff going on that talks about endpoints. We do a little search for this. Oh, okay, so we've got the loop. And other than that, nothing. So let's try just implementing this same loop over here on datadog-token.go. So if verify, we want to do for underscore base URL in. Now it wants us to use the scanner s dot endpoints s dot default endpoint, and let's see, I'm just going to move that up a block, and I'm going to get rid of this hard-coded URL and do base URL plus instead. I'm going to do the same magic in the second block down here. Sorry, let's go add a new closing brace down there. And again, I'm going to replace the hard-coded base URL with the value from the scanner's endpoints function. So let's see if this still works. Oh, hang on, sorry, I'm calling the built-in trufflehog rather than rebuilding. Okay, so I mean the code still appears to work, and this still gives me the US values instead of the EU values, and so this all looks good. So now I need to figure out, like, for GitLab, how, if you're using the GitLab detector, how do you pass a custom endpoint? And what you'll find with trufflehog, and this is the same with a lot of open source software, is that there are two versions of it. There's the open source version and the enterprise version. And so the open source version is available to anyone and we can all use it for free, or the enterprise version is hosted and you know, you get some additional good stuff, but you have to pay for it. And if we go and have a look at the web page for trufflehog, it's got resources, it's got enterprise docs, and it's got open source docs. So open source docs is what we want, but actually it just brings us back to the README on GitHub. pardon me. And the README doesn't have a great deal in it. It doesn't tell you anything at all about how to configure different endpoints. We don't see anything in here about changing endpoints. I have read through this a bit more carefully earlier. Okay, so there's not much in there that's of any use. So I wonder if we can get what we need from the documentation for the enterprise version, and whether that helps us at all on the open source version. And in here, there's a chunk of stuff about configuration, and the first page is about custom verifiers. And this looks instantly like exactly what we want. You can use custom verifiers to set the endpoints for enterprise or non-publicly accessible instances. This will allow trufflehog to verify secrets against those domains. Well, that's not quite the case with Datadog. The Datadog endpoints aren't, well, I guess they're enterprise, aren't they? But they're certainly publicly accessible. So it looks like you can do it in a config file that looks like this, where presumably for name we would be passing something like Datadog or Datadog token or something like that. It's hard to say exactly right now. And it does also say that you can do it via the command line. So that looks cool. So that looks like this. Look, you do trufflehog file system dot verifier github equals and then some URLs. So let's have a go at that. If I do go run dot file system, I want that one, but now I'm going to do verifiers Datadog equals, let's do the European endpoint. And so hopefully we'll see these two here turning green and these two turning grey if this works. Okay, so it says that doesn't work. What did I, oh right, yes, so it should be verifier single. Is that what it said here? Yeah, verifier single. I was cheating a bit there. I did poke around at this earlier and I was looking back in my command line history to see what I typed. Okay, so this is looking a bit better. Invalid detector ID for verifier, unrecognized detector type, Datadog. So I thought that it might either be Datadog or, look, the detector type is actually Datadog token. So let's try that. And if that doesn't work as well, I'll go poking around in the code and try and find the list of valid detector types. But no, it worked. It worked. And we were able to pass in the token that we wanted. But interestingly, these all validate. And I notice in this line here, it says configure detector with verification URLs, detector Datadog token, URLs, and there's two of them. It's using both the EU one and the regular one. I was not expecting that, and I think that probably the logic for set endpoints here is calling is what do we think it's doing? That the logic for endpoints is taking the default endpoint and adding it to a list that has been populated by, no, I don't think so. So endpoint setter, So I'm not really sure what's going on in here. I don't quite understand why this is picking up the default endpoint, but I think it is. I mean, we could test that. We could test that by changing the default endpoint to .com.foo and then run again with our EU endpoint passed in. And yeah, so now it says it was configuring the detector with verification URLs. That's the one I passed in, datadog.eu, and that's the default, datadoghq.com.foo. So it's always using the default. If we don't pass a URL on the command line, then it uses the default endpoint. If we do pass a URL, then it appends it to the list with the default endpoint on it. And I'm not 100% clear whether that's intended behavior or not, but it seems to be how this endpoint customizer logic is working. So that seems to give us a sort of fairly nice flexible way of overriding or appending an endpoint to the set of Datadog endpoints that trufflehog searches. And I think I'm going to go ahead and raise a pull request for this and see what happens, see what the owners come back with. I did notice there's also a test file here for Datadog token, and so it looks like we might want to load some. We might want to extend these tests a bit, but it looks like it relies on some machinery that I don't have access to. It looks like the secrets that are being used in these tests are stored in a GCP bucket, and that makes sense, I think. The test secrets have to be live secrets so that you can test if verification works. So you don't want to hard code them in the code base, because that's exactly the problem that trufflehog is trying to solve for us. So there will be a file in GCP somewhere with a bunch of secrets in it. So not quite sure what we want to do with this test. I might go, well, I guess the point is that we would want to have that this will be a Datadog API key and a Datadog app that were provisioned in datadoghq.com, and we want these tests to also run over a set of an API key and an app key that have come from, let's say, datadoghq.eu, and then have a test running over those, which down here you would have, your scanner, and you would presumably do something like set endpoints. Not quite sure how we set the endpoints actually, but oh, maybe we could do it that way and set a default instead. But the idea is that we would want to be able to run these tests with a set of secrets from some other Datadog instance, and that would require somebody at trufflehog HQ to create those credentials and put them in that file in GCP. So I'm not going to do that, but I'll mention on the PR that this would be a useful thing to do. And so that's it. We have got a change here which seems to give us the ability to set the Datadog endpoints that we're interested in at runtime. So that's super cool. And that's it from me. Thanks very much, guys. Hope you found this interesting. If you did, let me know. Cheers.